live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Than ever, Sleepless with Steve, alive and in living color. I'm wearing yellow, so lots of color on YouTube, wherever you may be, however you may be listening, coast to coast, on the last Wednesday of March. And we're going to be marching into April, no pun intended, here in just a couple of days, too. Somehow, some way, this year is moving at lightning speed. And it's definitely feeling like the end of March right now because, like, literally a half an hour before jumping on this, I felt like my allergies taking over all of a sudden, too. So apologies if there's any sniffling or anything like that. It's brutally cold out there today, too. It's like 30 out here in the lovely land of eastern Iowa. I assume it's about the same back home?
God, it's actually kind of chilly. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
It's cool out.
It looks nice right now.
No, these days piss me off because it looks like you can go out there and it's like 55, and then you go out there and, like, you freeze your ass off.
Yeah, and then there's like afternoon flurries, and then it just goes away.
We're supposed to get thunderstorms good part of this weekend out here. Supposed to be like nowadays, and I've learned and I've seen this, many years of living in the Midwest, you see this. Like the first couple 50 or 60 degree days in March and April, it's always rain. It can't be 60 and sunny. It has to be rain because of the humidity. All I want right now is to make good use of this deck and that zero gravity chair on my deck right now. Because I get off work at like 1:30, 2 o'clock, and there's some days when it's nice out that I don't even watch a movie. I don't even write anything. I just sit on the deck and listen to music for like 6 hours, and I'm missing that. I've been going through withdrawals of that over here the last couple of months with how cold it's been. But at any rate, at least it's bright out. I can get behind the fact that it doesn't get dark at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for a few months at least. But moreover, like I said, Sleepless with Steve tonight. We're doing something a little bit different, something we haven't done in quite a while. We used to do this segment called Required Viewing, and we have our rules about what requires required viewing. We haven't done one of those in a long time. It was a really good way, though, to during the pandemic, during the original run on the radio, and during the pandemic when there wasn't just the sheer volume of stuff coming out that there is now, that normalcy's returned for the most part. It was a good way to occupy, a week if we didn't have anything new or pressing to review. This week, Joe branded this one, and Joe picked this movie too. We're doing a retro review of Catherine Bigelow's movie Strange Days. And it's not like there's a deficit of stuff that's out now in theaters. It's just your boy over here, the host of the show, doesn't want to see anything out in theaters right now. The last three major releases have not moved the needle whatsoever. Though I will say I already have, not including the movie I'm seeing this Friday, but because it's technically still March, but already in April right now, I'm looking at 5 movies already in the first 2 weeks. Super Mario, Air, Pope's Exorcist, Mafia Mama, and Renfield are already on my list of things to see. So I'm not going anywhere. People have asked me if I why I didn't see John Wick 4, and I'm like, because I never saw John Wick 1, 2, or 3. So that's the easiest answer on that. And then there's I was texting a buddy today about Dungeons and Dragons, because you know what I did? I honestly did this today at work. I went back and I watched the trailer, the full theatrical trailer, because I'm like, do I really not want to see this? And I watched the trailer and I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I don't feel like sitting through this, truthfully. But you know what this movie strikes me as, and I'll eat crow if I'm wrong here. It's gotten pretty good reviews so far. It has. But you know what this really feels like to me? This really feels like the Hollywood's can't miss franchise starter that's going to bomb pretty badly. That's what this feels like to me. I don't see this thing doing super well. I think it's going to do decent.
I thought it was already tracking to do pretty bad too, unfortunately. Despite the rave reviews it got from early screenings and its South by Southwest secret screening that they did there. But I still think it's which sucks because Paramount to me is a studio that's kind of been doing pretty good lately when choosing blockbusters wisely, and it would have been cool to see another hit on their hands, despite the fact that it actually might be a good movie. It's just no one's gonna go see it.
It strikes me, and I don't know thing one about Dungeons and Dragons, okay, but it strikes me as something that feels like too broad for the D&D fans. It feels like too broad and commercial for the D&D fans, and it feels too niche for most moviegoers. That's what it looks like here. It seems they found a happy medium, judging by the reviews, but I think on the surface, that's the impression it gives for a lot of people. But yeah,
I think the diehard people will come out. I've seen a few of them come out and support it. It depends. If you're not, it looks very normy, as the kids say, and we say. Let's be honest. But yeah, I'm not that excited for it either. And granted, I haven't even played Dungeons and Dragons, but I do know a few things about it, and it's entertaining to watch other people play. But yeah, well, I am curious just to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this thing tracks, but that was my long-winded way of saying that, yeah, we do have movies to review. I just don't feel like going to see any of them. I haven't been to the theater now in over a week, so going through withdrawals over here on my end. But this kind of a lull weekend, though, was really good, though. It was a good thing. Because Joe mentioned this movie. We're gonna go into our news topic first, and we'll talk about Strange Days, but I'll just kind of start just to justify why we're reviewing it. Because I'm going to let Joe lead the discussion on the movie itself. But he brought up about a month and a half ago. He was like, I watched Strange Days. Did you watch it earlier this year? Is that when you brought it up to us, when you actually watched it?
I watched it in January. And all I thought about was like, dude, I feel like this would be a great movie to talk about on Sleepless. And all I thought to myself is, I'm sure Steve has seen it before and everything. And to hear that both of you have not seen it, I was like, ooh, this might be a good opportunity whenever we have some downtime.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it on our radars and such. Because I realize there's a lot of Catherine Bigelow movies I haven't seen.
Yeah.
There's a handful. I've never seen K-19, The Widowmaker. I haven't seen that one.
I have seen that one. That one's pretty good.
You know that Harrison Ford said that was one of, if not his favorite role ever, was in K-19, The Widowmaker. I was doing some reading on Catherine Bigelow earlier today. Harrison Ford called that his favorite, probably his favorite performance.
I'm going to watch her vampire movie she made, Near Dark. That's the next one I think I'm going to watch. I'm going to go through her filmography because, like, she's one of my favorite directors, and that's literally just because of the movies I saw that came out while I was alive, like Hurt Locker, Detroit, and Zero Dark 30.
What an interesting lineup of movies. Not to say that all directors need to have like a specific niche or genre to go down, but it's like I can't predict what she's gonna do, what she's done, or what she's gonna do next.
And like
it's crazy.
I never knew, and I'll talk about this more when we talk about her in general. I never knew she directed stuff like The Long Kiss Goodnight, I believe is what she directed, as well as Point Break. I just didn't think that was her based on what those movies were.
Yeah, she's definitely, for being a big director, she's under the radar. And like looking through like most of her filmography, a lot of her movies bombed.
Yeah.
And did not make money. K-19, The Widowmaker, lost a ton of money. This Strange Days lost a boatload of money. And it was kind of surprising that she was still good thing because she makes good movies. But it's kind of surprising that she's been able to like continue making movies with such large budgets. Then obviously The Hurt Locker came along. That was acclaimed. She did Zero Dark 30. She did Detroit, which I think Detroit bombed too, unfortunately.
It did.
That's unfortunate.
That was one of our favorite movies.
It's a hard movie to watch, but it's a good one.
Absolutely. We'll dive into Strange Days here in just a little bit, though. But first things first, a complete contrast to what we're talking about. I absolutely wanted to talk about this story at some point. When Dom put it on my radar, I read it today, but anytime the phrase geopolitical gets brought up, I default to Dom to explain it better than I could and stuff. But you guys still haven't seen this movie yet. It's Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. It is the slasher movie that is revolves around Pooh and Piglet killing a group of young women in 100 Acre Woods. And it is, I saw it in theaters last month. I took off Sleepless to go see it. And it is not very good. I do not recommend it. It's not abysmal, but it's not very good. It's surprisingly pretty generic for what it is. But the whole reason the thing got made, though, the whole reason it got made was because Winnie the Pooh entered public domain this year. And the filmmakers behind this thing are actually working on a Peter Pan horror movie. They're working on a Bambi horror movie. And they're working on a sequel to this. So it's kind of just a factory assembly line of Disney characters gone mad. But It definitely made for at least a halfway interesting sort of late Wednesday night showing, no less. But I didn't expect to really hear much about it again until Dom sent over a Hollywood Reporter article that says this thing's getting some trouble overseas in China specifically. It was pulled from more than 30 theaters ahead of its Hong Kong release. And the situation behind this, the subheading alone, of this article, again on Hollywood Reporter, is pretty wild. I'm going to throw it over to you, Dom, to kind of contextualize this whole Winnie the Pooh censorship situation that is currently going on in Hong Kong, if you could believe such a thing.
So, just some very basic and ridiculous background because a lot of stories involving censorship and China are just so ridiculous. I mean, a lot of American stories involving censorship are just flat out ridiculous, but particularly this one as well is that in the People's Republic of China, the leader, Chairman Xi Jinping, a symbol of kind of like criticism against him. It started off very mild, then it became like kind of an internal meme in China, and then it kind of grew because of the censorship of that symbol. Disney's interpretation of Winnie the Pooh, classic. Whatever you think of Winnie the Pooh, it's Winnie the Pooh. It's the yellow bear with the red shirt. It just became a meme because Joe, I'm very sorry for not. If you can go to your Facebook chat, I just shared a picture. I should have done this earlier. My bad. But there was a viral picture that got floated about with Xi and Barack Obama walking around, and then someone just kind of compared it. Hey, Xi and Obama kind of look like Pooh and his friend Tigger, and it's like, okay, well, I guess he's Winnie the Pooh now, and then it just became a meme. And then China being China was like, oh, okay, this is a critique against Xi, so we're just gonna ban Winnie the Pooh, just any mention of Winnie the Pooh online. Apparently, it's not as big of a ban in real life. Like you can talk about Winnie the Pooh, you can do this or that with Winnie the Pooh in real life, but any mention of China of Winnie the Pooh inside China online, which is a heavy regulated internet online, it's insane. You might get in trouble. I don't know about the whole social credit score thing, but regardless, Winnie the Pooh has inadvertently, kind of Streisand effect, has inadvertently become a symbol of resistance. I don't know how seriously of resistance, but certainly it's so ridiculous, so freaking ridiculous that this is the case, but it is now. So naturally, when any movie involving Winnie the Pooh, even the Disney releases, but this one in particular, the Blood and Honey movie, got banned in Hong Kong. Hong Kong being kind of being in this interesting limbo between the West and China. As we know, Hong Kong specifically has a very strong cinema scene. Had a very strong cinema scene for the longest time, independent cinema scene. But then with the kind of the handover between the UK of Hong Kong back to China, the People's Republic of China, that cinema scene, we don't have time to go over it. But this is just another case of like, you know what? Nah, not this movie. So it is a shame that the movie's bad, but basically the whole point of the article is saying, yeah, this is another ridiculous case of this censorship. And there's just the slightest hint of like, when you ban something, you kind of make it underground. Who knows what'll happen, in China, particularly Hong Kong, when you ban something. So that's why I said it's like if it's bad, that's unfortunate because who knows how it gets treated in China. But Death of the Author, what is just supposed to be this silly, really kind of exploitative movie of a Disney property. That wasn't even originally a Disney property, but has become infused as a Disney property. How it gets treated in China and Hong Kong, who the hell knows? But for now, it's just another case of just the ridiculous ban hammer in China. But we'll see.
I think that it's pretty funny that this movie of all things has kind of caused the stir that it is. Because there really isn't anything here's sort of my crux on it. And I talked about this in my review at stevepulaski.com. The crux of this movie is that if it wasn't Pooh and Piglet doing the killing in this movie, you take that element out of it, it really is a hopelessly generic slasher movie.
That's the
And
vibe I got. Yeah.
and it has got some of probably the absolute worst characterization I've seen in years in a horror movie, which is saying something. The women in this movie are nothing but TNA. I could not gun to my head tell you the main character's name. They are hopelessly undeveloped, not even undeveloped, as they are. And it's surprising in a way. I mean, I guess like I'm not as versed on Chinese censorship as you probably are. Even though I know that there are a lot of different things that ruffle the feathers of China over here when it comes to cinema and whatnot. I guess I just didn't expect this to be one of them, but it's continued publicity for a movie that, from what I understand, made quite a bit of money on those one night showings. Yeah, I think it made a lot of money from what
it made its money back. They say it's a micro budget film, so
it was like $50,000. I think it was $100,000.
It was made for $50,000 and it made 5.5 million.
Yeah, shit. It didn't take much.
Excellent return on investment. So
it didn't take much for this thing to be a total success. And then you factor into the budget the fact that they didn't have to get the rights to the characters. Like they didn't have to pay out for that either. So that's just added profit. I mean, I do think that we're going to get more of these movies. I mean, they're already working on a Bambi one, but I think that there's a formula here that I think the director and the studio has cracked in terms of like these public domain properties of popular children's books or children's characters turned into horror movies. I mean, this is the trauma generation and the grief generation, is it not? A24 has proven that pretty valiantly. So I think that this is one of those that this is one of those things, like they cracked this code in terms of what is it that these movies are going to be making a lot of money. Whether or not they're going to be really seen in China, though, is a different story. Joe, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. You guys kind of hit everything, honestly. I mean, like, it's China's whole thing. I've been keeping up with it because a lot of this also does relate to not only just the movie industry with like Winnie the Pooh in some movies, like being kind of catered towards China because Hollywood wanted to make its money and everything. There was like a whole dilemma with that. Video games have also suffered similarities where it was like you had like professional players who were like trying to speak out against what's happening in China and everything, and like they were being banned from like participating in like tournaments and stuff, or like that game was just never allowed to be played in China, stuff like that. So what was it, like Animal Crossing, I think back in 2020, which is one of my favorite cases of it. It was you can make your own like village flag and stuff in that game. And
they're making like the Hong Kong flag and everything.
They did that, and they did like Winnie the Pooh as their Chinese leader on the China flag and everything. And like that game suffered like some criticism from China, but nobody really cared because it was like, it's China, they're gonna ban stuff like that.
Movie studios, all creative studios, whatever medium, we joke about them kowtowing to China all the time, and like having to put this or that in their media or take this away from their media. But there is another side of that, which is that China is just insane with that stuff. And it's not just like, oh, like we might be culturally insensitive to the French, so they might not pick this up, or like no. They will just flat out like ban it because it's so ridiculous, and it's such a burgeoning market now. Again, as a moral thing, what should these studios be doing? That it's very easy to say like, oh, they should just not be supporting this or that, but Hollywood accounting, man, that China is a major factor. How it is after the pandemic, I think we're still parsing that, and with tensions on the rise, who knows? But I just find it funny that this movie in particular, apparently not a very good one, is in the middle of it. It's just another strange case of it. So it's not going to lift anytime soon. But it's a blip. But it's just funny, honestly.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it on my radar though, because I'm glad we could take a couple of minutes to talk about it and stuff. I'm glad we didn't. I'm also I think it was Joe who suggested that we open with this at least because it's just a really quick story. Because Strange Days definitely is going to be dominating the discourse here.
Yeah.
But absolutely glad you brought it up and kind of give a synopsis of that too. But,
Joe,
also,
did you show the picture?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it's such a funny ass picture.
That is a funny
It's
picture.
like, it's just like it's surprising because it's like, how the hell did that cause everything?
It's a different world. It's a totally different world. You know, you're not a part of it. You don't really
Yeah.
grasp it. Like, and I mean, especially just you see, like, I've seen at least 10 worse things on the net on Twitter alone today alone. You know what I mean? More offensive things than that. But I'm going to pass it again. I'm delegating with Steve over here today. But I do want to touch on this. There's a few points I want to make about this. But Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days is the movie that we are talking about today, and this is a fascinating movie that I can't believe I didn't really have on my radar beforehand until Joe brought it up too. Again, I always say I'm very young, and there's a lot of movies I still have yet to see, and I love discovering stuff because there's not often where I could say I've discovered stuff. You know, if nothing else, I've heard a little bit about it or something like that. This, I knew that the title was familiar, but that was about it. I couldn't even name you anybody in this movie, and I watched it today, so it's very fresh in my head. It is Strange Days, Catherine Bigelow's movie from 1995, kind of a cross between cyberpunk, and it's sort of a film noir.
Yeah.
Definitely, a
Neo
lot of different
noir
styles.
is what a lot of people have been comparing it to.
For sure, yeah, and that was a style that was very prevalent in the '90s. Very topical too in the present and back then as well. The movie touches on a lot of different, cultural events, for better or for worse, mostly worse in the '90s, namely the Los Angeles riots in '92 that were prompted after the Rodney King beating, in LA. That's one of the big sort of touchstones of this movie is that whole national crisis, as it was. And it essentially it's tough to explain, but it's a little tough to explain, but it takes place, just to give a very brief overview. It's set on the last 2 days of 1999, December 30th and December 31st, and it follows this black marketeer salesman of these recordings that allows somebody to experience the somebody else's memories.
Mhm.
So essentially what has become sort of a popular black market commodity in this world is the experiences of other people, these tapes that when the device is called Squid, I believe. When you put the headset on, you are all of a sudden then you see the first person point of view perspective of somebody else. And these are not like going on, like I'm sure in this world there's some people, exchanging Squid tapes of going on roller coasters and stuff. This is not that type of shit though.
The movie opens up with one of these, and it's robbing a Chinese restaurant, and like you're one of the robbers throughout it, and it's filmed in a first person view as well.
Yeah, and you see quite a lot of this stuff too. You see, like, it's a lot of robbing, it's a lot of murders, it's a lot of police altercations, rape. I mean, it's hardcore stuff that you are seeing through the perspective of the perpetrators of these crimes. And it follows two individuals. Lenny, played by Ralph Fiennes, who's excellent. Actually looked like, and I knew it was Ralph Fiennes throughout the whole thing, but I'll tell you right now, there's a few points over, like, during this movie, he really, like, how sweaty he gets and everything, he really looks like Bradley Cooper.
Dude, yeah.
I was thinking of that at many points. I'm like, this could be just straight up Bradley Cooper. Like, he could play his dad in a movie. I don't know if he has, but dude.
Yeah, I made the joke when I was taking notes in this movie. I said the best supporting actor in this movie is Sweat. Because especially like how grungy he gets throughout the whole thing. But Ralph Fiennes, not Bradley Cooper, is Lenny. Angela Bassett is Mace. And let me tell you something else too. I know a lot was made about Angela Bassett's performance in Black Panther Wakanda Forever that got her the Oscar nomination. God damn it, this movie. I would have campaigned for her to get an Oscar nomination over this one, over
She
Black Panther.
she was a total badass in this movie, dude. Like, I mean,
She's great.
and like again, like, this just shows like Bigelow like just knew how to like do women characters. Like, this is why Jessica Chastain's character in Zero Dark 30 was as good as she was. It's just like she like was a total badass, and like I really enjoyed watching her on screen. This is like, honestly, like for the longest time I was like, yeah, maybe like Wakanda Forever might be one of my favorite performances that Bassett's ever done, because I really think she gave it her all in that. No, this is like, I was like, this performance was so freaking good.
She plays Mace, Angela Bassett does in this movie, and these two team up. These two team up in this like dystopian hellscape that is LA in 1999, to try and like there's a lot of different things happening here. There's the murder of a popular rapper / social activist in Glenn Plummer playing Jericho 1 in a really good performance. One of the villains too is Tom Sizemore, who plays Max Peltier. The late Tom Sizemore as of recently too. A couple other decent performances too. You get Juliette Lewis, who plays a prostitute in this. She plays Faith. And then you have Vincent D'Onofrio as well. He plays one of the arresting officers of Jericho 1 too.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of good performances in this thing. A lot of really swell visuals. But again, I'm not going to lead the discussion on it though. Joe, you were the one who suggested we watch this film and stuff. I want to know kind of your general impressions, why it stuck with you, and why it was a candidate for you to mention on Sleepless.
We kind of like brushed on a few points right there, but what really stuck with me is just like, and this is something we'll get into later after we talk about all of our general thoughts, is like how much of this movie really kind of just seemed like it was ahead of its time. Through both like its commentary of what it was talking about at the time, but also the technology that it was introducing throughout the film. The entire time I was watching it, I just thought of like comparisons. If any of you have played Cyberpunk, or if you've ever watched even the anime that's on Netflix, like these things are called like brain dances, where you go into somebody's head and everything. It like, even when I was like playing those games, I always thought about like, oh, like this is kind of similar to social media, and to see like Strange Days do it as good as it did here, but also have like the market aspect of it, is like, it's almost like it's like the dark side of the internet in some ways. And just, eventually what one of the brain dances is used, which is spoilers for anybody that has, if you haven't watched this movie, I suggest checking it out. But the brain dance that eventually leads to showing what happened to Jericho 1, and the conversation that Ralph Fiennes and Angela Bassett's characters have about what they should do with this footage and everything, and like what it can do to the world at this point in time. It was just like, my God, like, that could be going back to 2020 with the whole George Floyd thing, and just like, the person that was probably recording all that footage, and all the various people that are probably recording it in general, and just sharing that on the internet, knowing like, this needs to get out there, people need to see this. There was that. There's also just like the performances in this movie, like we were saying, like Ralph Fiennes is like one of my favorite actors. The Grand Budapest Hotel, him as the concierge, like, the person that owns the hotel and everything, M. Gustav. That's like one of my favorite comedic performances of all time. And I've seen dramatic stuff from him, like, he was in the Bond films. He's in like, some really good dramas as well. Dramatic wise though, I think this might be my favorite performance of his, because he plays it so good, switching between a total sleazeball black market dealer, and then to like he's a former cop, by the way, in the movie. He swaps between those two personalities seamlessly. There's never a moment like I'm just like, yeah, I'm not buying him as this, I'm more buying him as the sleazeball, or I'm buying him more as the cop than the sleaze. No, it's like, dude, he really embraces both sides of this character, man, and he's just so interesting to watch. And then, like I said, Bassett is just a total badass, and they have great chemistry together. The other thing about the movie is just the look of the movie. I know like Y2K movies, like they're kind of like outdated and everything because nothing came of it, but just kind of being in this time capsule moment of like the 90s, of what they thought like the future was going to look like down the line and everything, especially going into the 2000s and whatnot. I just thought it was a cool like look to the film, and using the backdrop of LA kind of kind of like reflecting what was happening in 92. I thought also added to the film's atmosphere of it being like cyberpunkish as well and everything. um it was just such a unique movie that I was like, how the hell do people not know about this? It's cyberpunk, and that's been blowing up lately because I know Blade Runner didn't do the best in box office, but on home video it killed it. The video game was like one of the most talked about video games. Not Blade Runner, just Cyberpunk, the video game. It was talked about one. It was one of the most talked about video games, for better or for worse. Back in 2020 when it released. And it was just like, I'm surprised people just didn't know about this. Catherine Bigelow directed it. James Cameron wrote it, and like both of them produced the film as well. It's got an all-star cast and everything. And to just see that, like, yeah, it just didn't do well, or just like, you know, it didn't even find like a cult following status like some of our other films that Ebert points out in his review of it. Just
Great
shocked
review
me.
too.
Yeah, it is
really good review.
It's a very good review. Yeah. I was just like, the entire time I'm watching, I'm like, my God, like this is so damn good. This is an underrated gem that I just felt like was like, you know, probably one of the best films of that decade. But B, I just wanted to share it with you guys, and also share it over Sleepless to see if we can just get another person to view the movie. But I'm gonna pass it off to Dom.
Yeah, first thing I was impressed with is how Catherine Bigelow was able to film this by just going to the streets of Los Angeles and just filming what was going on. Just very impressive. Just tanks on the street, people just constantly rioting and just fighting. I'm like, this is so ridiculous, but that kind of pushes the I guess we'll call it the cyberpunk element of it over the top. But if you think about it, like, it's not really that hyper futuristic. Like cyberpunk pushes it. I was expecting, reading the plot of this film at first, just a quick summary. I'm like, oh, is this going to be like Fifth Element where they're doing just crazy shit? But no, beyond the squid technology, there's really like it's actually very grounded and like not too far in, I mean, literally not too far in the future from when it was made, but also just like that technology wasn't that crazy. That even the fashion was was kind of muted. Like I love like I love particularly 90s interpretation of like, hey, this is like the underground, and then you got like random people with snakes and like just long hair, mesh shirts and everything, which was kind of true at the time, but it's just over the top. It's just the mainstream's interpretation of that, and I always get a kick out of it. And yeah, dude, this is a very 90s movie, but thankfully it's 90s in the correct ways, in that it's an epic. This is like epic's probably a too strong of a word, and kind of misgenrering it, but it feels that way. It's 2.5 hours, this thing.
It is,
but honestly, I was invested. This is neo-noir is very accurate here. You've got all the archetypes. You've got the scorned lover. You've got the detective who, you know, former cop who's all strung out because he has an addiction of some kind. I particularly like how the addiction here isn't heroin or alcohol. It's memories.
It's memories, yeah.
It's love, and like how like that. Okay, you took this potentially gimmicky, gimmicky tech, this thing that's like, oh, okay, we're going to center our whole movie around this. But aside, in addition to be actually using it very cleverly, there's a very good mystery in here, using that technology in a very unique way that you can't get without it. It also is the driving emotional force for this character, for Ralph Fiennes' character, for Nero, is Lenny, is that he just can't get over his love, which is such a core part of so many noir films, that it's only enhanced by the tech, and it's not gimmicky at all, and it's so cool. And this cast, like, there's not a single weak point in this cast. It is firing on all cylinders, which is one of my favorite turns of phrase, but it is so true here. Like, Angela Bassett is freaking hot in this movie, and she is just a badass. Juliette Lewis is just, she is like such a broken, fallen angel here, but she's got a fierceness to her as well. The true villains, Vincent D'Onofrio and William Fichtner, but like two villainous actors in so many other things. that in this movie come together to just be like the worst of the worst. At first, I was like, "Yo, is that the T-1000 from Terminator 2?" Like, no, it's a different kind of dude. But yeah, man. You got the original Prophet of Truth from Halo 2 as the producer. I had to look him up. I was like, why does this guy sound vaguely familiar?
He's also the cinematographer from Nope. Like, and I was just like, why does his voice sound familiar? I'm like, oh yeah, it's right.
Dude, you're right. Holy shit. Yeah.
He
we don't deserve the perfect shot. That's my favorite line from that movie. It's like, it's so needlessly over the top, but it works so damn well.
Dude that talks in fortune cookies is all I always say.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, this cast is awesome. And dude, I was so impressed by this movie because I kind of wasn't looking forward to it. No offense, but I was like, oh man, 2.5 hours. I there's something about bad 90s movies that put me off even more so than other movies. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because how I grew up, and I just grew up around. I was just introduced, apparently, maybe it was just bad luck, but I was introduced to some bad, movies of I can't even think of it, but it's like any movie.
That decade to me is also just a time where like. And that's not to say like it's not going on today or it didn't happen in the 80s.
Yeah, I'm being particularly unfair, but something about it just puts a worse taste on my mouth than a bad 2000s or a bad 2020s movies
There was a lot of, to me, hey, let's make a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ripoff called Three Ninjas. Hey, let's make the Good Burger movie. Hey, let's do this movie. Like, there was just a lot of that in the 90s. Carrot Top, he's funny. Give him a movie. Like,
yeah, a lot of that going on.
It was a lot of that during the 90s.
Yeah, but this movie, it plays the budget is over the top, and like the ambition here is bursting to the seams. Like, holy shit, some of these shots, some of these set pieces, some of these crowd shots, some of these etc. It's very impressive.
The crowd shots, by the way, those were, I think it was like 10,000 extras were on set that day.
You know what? I was thinking, like, how did they cheat this? You know what? They probably didn't, because like $42 million in 90s money is pretty damn big, and like that's impressive to me. So like all of that, but all that aside, the fact that its plot was very grandiose, almost epic like, but just they didn't go over the top with its futuristic technology, and it has a lot to say. But it's surprisingly grounded as well, and it's very. We'll go into this after the break, but it's and whatever else we want to talk about. But it's very prescient. Like, it's the same shit, different day. Like, Los Angeles, black people being fucked over by the police, corruption, and addiction, and it's like that. Take away the squid element, it's the same shit, like, but in a good way. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll be right back here on Sleepless with Steve, talking about Strange Days. So stick around, and we'll be right back.
Back and better than ever, Sleepless with Steve. Live on YouTube after a Zoom-sponsored intermission. We are talking Strange Days, the Catherine Bigelow cyberpunk thriller. Really got a lot of meat on this bone to talk about. No shortage of stuff. I'm going to let Dom continue making his points where you left off on about Bigelow's film.
I'll just say this because we could, we could write dissertations on this, but honestly, the sad, unfortunate part of it is that the reason why the themes of this movie work so damn well is because we haven't solved any of this shit.
Yeah,
and it's like straight up to March 3rd. March 29th, 2023. It's like it's the same shit, different day.
Bigger piles, as I said.
Yeah. And it's just so sad and unfortunate, but it is very much true. But yeah, despite all the theme, the unique story elements of the squid technology, of Y2K, of all this and that cultural whatever, it works so well because the core of the story, the template, is just executed so damn efficiently and well. I guess efficiently may not even be the best term for it because it is a 2.5-hour movie. But could you see yourself trimming much of this movie from the final product? Because I don't know if I could. I've only seen it once though. So Joe, you may have better thoughts on this.
That is the dilemma I have with this movie, is that I do feel like it is a bit long, but like everything it does, it's like it's necessary for the story. That being said, like I do kind of think the reveal at the end, it wasn't that shocking. Like I kind of saw it coming from.
I kind of had it pegged.
Yeah, and honestly, what was keeping me more interested is what they were gonna do relating to Jericho 1 more than the murders at this point. I was like, you know what? I got the murder solved. What's gonna happen here though? I want to know how this plays out, and that could just be because the time I'm living in is just like it's happening around me, and like it's like I was I got to see like a big event similar to it in 2020 and everything. Yep. So I was just kind of like, I'm more interested in that than I am with this whole murder plot. But it's not like that plot's bad. It's really good. In fact, some of the best scenes in the movie and some of the best interactions stem from all that and everything. But when it becomes like this way street of like, okay, we have plot A now and plot B, and we have an hour left of this movie, I was like, oh man, like I really wish we just cut out plot B of like this murder thing and just focus on this other stuff. Because like to me that was just way more interesting. But I really don't have too many complaints other than like really that, and I do think look, it is a spoiler review, but the kiss at the end, I was just kind of like, oh come on.
You know what? Okay, hold on. So at the end, Ralph Fiennes and Angela Bassett, throughout the whole movie, they have this romantic tension, and you know what? I'm cool with it. I'm okay with it. Like I think that if this movie was made today, they would have like a respect for each other, which I think is cool. Yeah, platonic thing, a strong platonic friendship, which I think I agree, that would have been the better route. But for the 90s, there's already a lot of good stuff going here, so I think I'll take it. Yeah. But honestly, it's not even that far-fetched because the one flashback here, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only flashback in this movie that isn't part of the squid technology is Angela Bassett's character.
She refuses to use the squids.
Yeah, is her reliving the trauma in her life and how she got introduced to Lenny Nero. Yep. And I'm like, you know what? You suffer a trauma like that, and he's taking care of your kid, and you have a deep friendship there. I honestly, it's a little cheap, but not ridiculously cheap, and I was okay with it. And honestly, the tension was actually pretty impressive because it's these two actors, you don't think they would have good chemistry. These two characters, you don't think they'd have good chemistry, but they do, and the fact that they're able to execute it is again the testament to both of their already proven acting. Dude, the amount of acting that these actors had to do when they had the squid on, and it's just them making O faces for like 30 seconds. I'm like, damn, that's a good job, dude, because you had to do a lot of that, particularly Ralph Fiennes.
That might be as hard as like trying to act with like a stuffed animal who's supposed to be like a CGI creature.
Yeah.
No, I loved. I'll tell you right now, like, and maybe love's a weird word, but like, I found myself definitely entranced by like the voyeurism of this whole thing. And it's really hard to watch this thing in the present day without kind of
Yeah.
touching on or like trying to draw comparisons to modern life. I mean, obviously there's the Rodney King George Floyd connection there on the surface too, but the voyeuristic angle here for me is a lot like like the person shoot, or like the first person perspectives and everything reminds me of a lot of like obviously cell phone video is the big thing, but also first person shooter video games too. And things like that. At this time when this movie was made in 95, virtual reality was starting to become a concept that like seemed plausible. I think about it, it's kind of an eye-rolling comparison, but this movie came out the same year that the Virtual Boy came out, the Nintendo video game console. And that was predicated on virtual reality, as bad as that thing sucked. So it was in the collective consciousness at the time that this was, trying, that Catherine Bigelow and company were trying to implement the first person shooter or the first person perspective devices and stuff. And this thing really does not skimp on controversial things like racism, police brutality, abuse
Sexual
of power,
violence.
sexual violence. I think the most disturbing sequence of this whole thing for me, probably, well done sequence, but Christ, it was a hard one to watch, is the scene with the intruder when he makes her witness her like assault and
makes her
murder.
feel her own like assault,
Makes
to
her
the pleasure
feel
that he's having.
Yes, like watches herself, like forces her to watch herself, be assaulted and murdered. Like that, that was rough.
Another, this
Well
is
done,
again weird to
but,
say,
man.
but it's another effective use of this unique device in your world that it's like you can't really do in any other another story because it's such a unique thing that you made up. Very gimmicky potentially, but they were able to use it in a very disturbing, messed up way. And it's like they keep showing it to people too. I'm like, oh man, I don't think you need to keep showing this. Jesus Christ. But yeah, I was reading initially some reactions to the contemporary reactions, and they were saying like, oh, it's very exploitative for its violence and its sexual violence and all that. I'm like, honestly, like I think everything was appropriately applied. Because again, it's once you have that neo-noir tag, you kind of have pedigree. I mean, you can do whatever, but like with any movie, but I'm saying like in terms of like when you have that genre tag on it, you have kind of a free range to do what you need to do to tell something gruesome and gritty. Because the genre is just bursting with examples where hookers are getting abused, people are getting offed in gruesome ways, and here I don't think it was even that super exploitative, because everything just felt appropriate for the genre, and everything was effectively balanced to the story. I guess the murder mystery plot with the serial murderer and rapist, I guess that was a point where it kind of fell to the background. And it was in any other mystery, this would have been the absolute forefront. But because there's a bunch of other stuff going on with like race relations, the assassination of like a prominent black figure in the community, police corruption, all that stuff, it's something that needs to be focused on, and it wasn't quite as focused on. So I guess I can see that, but yeah, it's another staple of the genre, is what I'm saying. So it's not surprising that they included it.
I think I'll just throw this out there too. I think the only like mild critique that I would have with it is that I felt the dialogue at times, like especially the not the exposition, which this movie I think incorporates extremely well. This movie doesn't feel like it's outlining like the events or anything, or like outlining the world in sort of talky, expository ways. I did think though that some of the interpersonal dialogue, mainly between Lenny and Mace at times, is a little bit too, I think, formal. I think is the word I'm looking for. I think given some of the situations that they're in and the world itself, I think there's a little bit of a formality to the dialogue here that feels a little bit maybe not as gritty as I think that like a lot of this movie is. A lot of raw and gritty it is. It's by no means a large complaint, but if I had to nitpick one thing, I think that would probably be it. Other than that, I mean,
Is it the written dialogue, or is it just Angela Bassett being such a stone cold son of a bitch in this movie in a good way that the delivery seems formal?
that's a good question. I think honestly, I think it's more Fiennes than it is her. I think
Really?
Oh,
Yeah, I think Ralph
I think
Fiennes as
a little bit,
yeah,
yeah. I think he's got like the character of Lenny. I think Lenny has like this almost like sort of like I don't want to say weaselly, but like sort of like this insidious nature
kind of.
about him.
He's slimy,
You know,
slimy.
he's slimy. That's a good word. Like he's got this sliminess to him though, but he also kind of carries himself, especially in some of just the way he phrases certain things.
yeah.
I think seems a little bit too polished. I thought some seemed a little bit too polished here or there. It really wasn't a critique towards
Could just
Bassett
be the
though.
British actor trying to do an American accent thing. I don't know if it was that.
Possibly. That would probably be the only real thing that I could really harp on with this thing, though. I think the technology element, like, I think the visuals have aged very well too.
Yeah.
I think this
The
is an
climax of this
attractive
movie
movie.
at Times Square, it looks so good, man.
Yeah.
Like the set design of that, all the extras and all
The
the
Times Square, or is this LA?
Oh, I'm sorry. Why the hell did I say
LA.
Times Square?
That's
It
fine.
looks
It's
like
not
Times
hard
because
here or
it's
there.
future LA and everything. They
Right,
have all
right,
the,
right, right.
the neon billboards and everything. My
That's fine.
bad.
That doesn't matter. Yeah.
I had written down in my notes that comparison to Times Square, but I read just only Times
Yeah.
Square. Uh, but like it looks so cool. Like I just remember I was like, my God, like you have like this whole like gritty like look to it, but there are moments in this movie where it's just like it's actually like a beautiful looking movie at sometimes. And the climax, once like everything and that countdown finally hits zero and it's 2000, like you kind of have this like hope at the end of the movie where it's like, will this world actually begin to heal because of what has been revealed here today, and just like how everybody just kind of got, you know, what went down here in LA at the end of 1999. Will the 2000s be a moment of healing for just the city and the world?
I will say that message didn't come across to me as so. Are we getting into spoilers here? Can we?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do
Yeah.
we want to do that? Yeah, I mean it's a movie from the '90s, but yeah, I didn't get that message. I don't know if that was the message that meant to be perceived, because part of it I think is a writing error in like the plot, um, which is that so the solution that Lenny comes up with for this infamous tape, what's effectively going to be like a George Floyd moment,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, let's go to the journalists. It's like, no, let's go to the one cop that I know is good. And I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, that's okay. So it turns out, so this is the 90s-ness. This is the 90s naivete of it all here, which is that, yeah, so let's have this absolute piece of TNT dynamite that is going to explode if it gets out. Let's go to the commissioner of the LAPD, who I just know is a good guy. So he's going to take care of it, as if in real life, particularly in the 90s, the real life 90s LAPD commissioner isn't just going to destroy the tape and sweep everything under the rug. Also, what happens in real life, but because we have cell phones, because we have body cams, the body cams don't even stop what some of these corrupt cops do. Like, they just forget it's on sometimes. But anyway,
Yeah, literally go and look at what's it
Yeah.
called? Audit the Audited. Go look at that YouTube
yeah,
channel.
well, yeah. But it's like that part was just super unrealistic to me. It's like, yeah, okay, that's not the solution.
Here's the thing I think about that too, because I see your points, especially about like I think you coined a really good phrase there, 90s naivete of the whole thing. But I will add though that like the optimistic sort of ending of this thing, I think makes. I'm speaking more broadly of not maybe what I would tend to believe about it, but I think more broadly from a consumer perspective, though, is that like that optimistic, happy-ish ending, like makes sort of the violence a little more palatable for you know, because I think if it would have ended with a certain bleakness, you could argue it would have been more realistic. I mean, we're still talking about how relevant this movie is in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
But you could have argued, you know, it would have been a bleaker ending and everything, but it might have seen, I could see, because she already faced questions for it, I could almost see how like Catherine Bigelow would have gotten caught in a web of like this movie glorifying rape and violence and voyeurism, when it technically, I think, tries to wrap around and have more of an optimistic, bright side sort of conclusion to everything. And sort of, again, the whole blanket thing that not all law enforcement are bad, and sort of that, you know, mindset too, because there are, I mean, like, you know, it comes out 3 years after the LA riots. It's set in LA.
The ballsiness of that alone
was in the 90s,
is impressive
from
for
a female
time.
director is
that
impressive
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, 100%. A female director 3 years after the Rodney King riots, and the story has this. I will knock it, but honestly, like, that is 2023 me putting the values upon that movie. And if I had seen it come out at that time, I totally would have been like, yeah, that's totally how it should go down.
If there's any consolation too, let's also look at how her career has evolved and her view on things. Like, compare the ending to Detroit to this ending now.
I was just gonna say, this makes this Detroit is an exceptional companion piece.
It does, yeah, it
100%.
is.
I thought that numerous times throughout this thing.
That I meant to type to you guys is like, do you see any similarities from this to Detroit? But I was like, I'll just bring it up now.
Yeah, I think not that she's even, I don't know if she's even doing this concertedly, but if she was trying to respond to her earlier self, although I guess this is a James Cameron question, but she's the director at the end of the day. But it's like, yeah. If I need to rectify this one loose end from Strange Days, I'm gonna put it in Detroit, and she 100% did it there, because that movie is a horror show. And
that's brutality. A story that really, like, I mean, like,
also it really happened.
It really happened, but like also doesn't have like really the cultural relevance. I mean, it did happen in the 60s, but there's a lot of things that happened in the 60s that we still talk about.
Yeah.
You know, at least like the Rodney King is still relevant. Rodney King, you could say the name and most people know what you're talking about. The Detroit story, I'll be blunt, I had no idea what it was, and I don't think I'm the only one like that had no idea about the background of that whole thing. And that movie, I still think about Detroit every now and again, especially when, you know, watching movies dealing with race and everything like that. And that is a top-down masterpiece, I think. I would put honestly, for favorite Bigelow movies, I would put Strange Days and Detroit at the top of the list. I really would. And that's no slight honestly, to Hurt Locker or Zero Dark or Zero Dark or anything like that. That's no slight to those. I just think in terms of impact, Strange Days and Detroit, like, they set out to do something and portray, like, in Strange Days' case, this dystopian LA, in Detroit's case, a reprehensible historical account of racism. And they do so in a way that feels completely realized, human, and powerful, like in a punching manner, for sure.
Getting back to the technical side of things, I'm just thinking about this now. I'm impressed by how well she can do in this kind of epic, grandiose thing like Strange Days or a Zero Dark 30, where you have the protagonist just kind of going from set piece to set piece to set piece, and like this massive budget. But then she can just nail, just talking about Bigelow now, she can just nail claustrophobic
bottle films.
Like, thank you, bottle films like K-19. I kind of want to watch that again.
Hell, even
you know, it's in a submarine the whole time. Yeah, exactly. This is all. I mean, there's some scenes outside with some riots, but it's mostly in this one hotel.
Yeah.
And you get to know that hotel very well. At least just kind of the pressiness of the placement of everything.
Yeah.
Is super impressive. Again, she's just a director that I think a lot of people sleep on, despite her being this massive name and Academy Award winning.
What was it? For my high school, we had to make like a person we want to induct into the History Hall of Fame, is what my history teacher called it. And I chose Catherine Bigelow, and like we had to make like a unique thing for their poster, and I made her Oscar that she won for best director for the Hurt Locker as my poster. Like, I recreated the shape of like the Oscar statue and everything. And ever since ever since I've done that though, like I keep going back to her filmography. I'm like, you know what? I knew it was the reason why I was fucking like 100% down for this woman, man. She owns this shit.
I want to watch K-19. I remember that was always on TV.
Yeah.
Like growing up on cable, at least we had direct TV. So it was always on. I've never seen it. And with reading about Bigelow today and stuff in preparation for this movie, again, I just watched it a couple hours ago. I kind of just want to get a better handle on her filmography because it's like I haven't really like I guess now I've seen 4 movies by her. I guess
As someone who likes Chernobyl, which is the story about these Soviet characters trying to navigate a nuclear disaster, I also really like K-19 and vice versa.
yeah, because there's that one. There's Point Break, which I've never seen. I've never seen that
Oh,
one.
You know what?
wow.
I haven't either.
What?
I haven't either. Yeah.
Oh my
You
god,
should- maybe
we
we
might
should
have to
have
make
done Point
another
Break.
retro review.
Crap.
Are we just gonna have like Bigelow breaks where we just like
The Bigelow breaks. I like that.
watch a random Catherine Bigelow movie?
Spin a wheel.
Yeah.
Oh, we landed on Zero Dark 30.
I'm down.
God, even
I
if
like her stuff, but I just keep forgetting because it's like it's not like she's a Scorsese where it's like, oh yeah, it's a Scorsese crime movie, sure, with Robert De Niro in it. No, she switches actors up, she switches genres up, she switches
genres, man.
and it's like you can't pin her down, and that makes her probably one of the most versatile directors that is just out there.
Yeah,
I would agree.
her next film is called Aurora. I don't know if it takes place in Aurora, but it's about it's a drama about like Silicon Valley CEO, like strange brother, divorce. It's like okay, total mix up from going from Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30, Detroit, now this.
Another bottle film, but this time they're in like a Facebook office.
I'm
watch
excited. I'm excited. I would absolutely watch that. I don't know if you want to go into final thoughts. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to,
No,
Joe?
I like
Well,
even
I'm
like,
game. I'm game for whatever.
I'm totally fine with wrapping it up right now and giving our final thoughts. We'll be bleeding on the OT, and who knows how long that'll go on for. I know we all have.
Are we
lives
giving
and everything.
star ratings, or is this
Yeah,
kind
I
of
would
just
like to.
beyond that?
I thought so.
I can go first if you guys want.
You go for it.
Okay. Yeah, man, this was it's funny actually. After I found this movie, I was on TikTok and like I saw other people being like underrated movies on HBO Max, and this was one of them. And I'm like, yes, please get word out about this movie in general. This to me, it was a surprise to find. I just came across it because after I saw Avatar 2, I was just going through James Cameron's filmography. And I was just like, oh, Strange Days, he wrote this. Catherine Bigelow? I'm like, my lady, I'm sorry, I didn't know. So I found out I was on HBO Max. I turned it on, and I just remember sitting there and my mind was just blown at how good it was. I was just like, how many people do not know about this movie? I asked a couple of my friends who, one of them is going to film school. He said he didn't know about it. I rewatched it with him. Just to see like his reaction to make sure I wasn't going crazy and I wasn't just simping for Bigelow here. I think it covers so much within that 2 hours and 30 minutes. There's a lot you could take away from this movie in terms of its messaging. It's like, it was ahead of its time. There's some great articles. I linked it to the guys here, but if you just type in Strange Days and you on Google and you type the news articles, you'll find them. There's one from Collider, and MovieWeb, and you can find plenty of others. And I highly suggest reading Ebert's review to put you at that point in time when this movie came out and just a reaction to it. It's so good, and even if you take all that away, it is just a really cool world with great performances and a great story to it. At the end of the day, it's just great filmmaking altogether. At the end of the day. I really wish they'd never got divorced because I would love to see these two make another movie like this again, where he writes and she directs. Because I feel like Cameron just knows how to do like blockbustery writing and stuff and have like really cool moments.
He really does.
And Strange Days kind of shows that through this writing. And I think Bigelow, like, even though he's like a different style director, I think Bigelow knows how to ground that stuff and make it raw and cool. So for me, it is a 4-star film. I absolutely love it. And maybe it's just like, oh, look what I found and everything. But I will tell you, like, when I first finished watching it, I was like, yeah, 3.5. But the longer I've thought about it, the more I've talked about it with the people, the more love I've gotten for this movie. It's just grown over time. This is the 3rd time I've rewatched it already.
I'll go and then I'll throw it over to you, Dom. Yeah, thoroughly impressed by this movie, top to bottom. Catherine Bigelow again. So not somebody you really think of, and I just think it's because of the fact that she's not as prolific as a lot of other directors. Not somebody you think of when it comes to, some of the directors that can immerse you in a lot of different storylines, but she is absolutely one of them. And this movie too, I think the technology and everything ran a real risk of
Yeah.
sort of aging itself or sort of becoming dated there and everything like that. And I don't see that being the case with this movie. And I also think that it's really anchored by two tremendous performances by Fiennes and Bassett. I think that they are really the emotional glue of this movie, especially when this movie does get raw, when this movie does get very violent, sort of on a dime at times. I think it's top down impressive, and I love the world, the sort of the cinematography here that blends that cyberpunk, and it's not totally full blown cyberpunk. It really isn't.
We might even be misusing that term, but there's probably a better
that's
term
what
for
Wikipedia classifies this as a
really?
cyberpunk thriller.
I can see it.
I think it's like the clothing, the look of people, and also just some technology. Not only is it just like the brain dance device squid, but there's also like giant monitors and stuff throughout LA.
I get it. Yeah.
For sure. I love the crossbreeding amalgam that comes with the cyberpunk sort of visual edge and the neo-noir visual edge as well. I think it makes it really enticing for the full run of the movie, which I didn't feel like was particularly too long personally. I think there was a lot about this that was incredibly well done. So it's 3.5 out of 4 for me. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I've just made a note. I was amending my calendar here, my movie watching calendar. I plan on watching K-19 The Widowmaker in the next couple of weeks, sometime in April. I do want to give that a watch.
I want to know what you think about it. Honestly, I kept on trying to compile a reason to not be 4 stars, but at the end of the day, I have to give it 4 because for a 90s movie to be this long and epic, it's while being neo-noir so effectively, which I really appreciate, and to handle its gimmick so damn well, and bake it into the story and the themes that it has anyway. This is a really, really, really ambitious movie, and I don't really see much of that pedigree during that time that isn't like a Titanic already. I'm sure I'm missing out on some others, like what's a movie as long as that? What, Shawshank? But that's such a kind of a straightforward move, not straightforward, but it just pales in comparison to the feeling of Strange Days. So I gotta give it 4 out of 4 because I'm just thoroughly impressed and surprised by how engrossed I was into the story, and I could even watch it again.
I'm so happy.
Same.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I can't wait for them to watch this, dude.
The cards were stacked against it. I wasn't looking forward. It's like, 90s movie.
Every time Steve,
like, what is this poster? It's like, come on.
In March, he's like, oh, let's review Creed 3. Oh, let's review this. I'm like, damn it. I want to review that stuff too, but like,
it wasn't a slight because no, I had a good belief that this thing was going to be pretty good. I mean, if nothing else, I read the Ebert review too, which was 4 stars, and I'm like, I trust my God over here, name my cat after him. So like, I had a pretty good intuition that like it was going to be a pretty good movie. It was just more of a time thing. It was not a slight by any means. It's a little bit tougher sometimes for me to get into dystopian movies, but
absolutely, yeah.
But no, this one I latched onto right away, was definitely gripped by this thoroughly. Enjoy is kind of a tough word for it, but it's a worthy one. I did enjoy this.
Awesome.
Good stuff. I really appreciate you recommending it, man, because it was a lot of fun to review too. Moreover, though, we are looking at next week. We are looking at reviewing Super Mario Brothers movie.
No, Murder Mystery.
Right. No, Murder Mystery too, excuse me. I knew as soon as that left my mouth, I knew that wasn't right. I keep forgetting there's 31 days in March. Yes, Murder Mystery 2, the new Adam Sandler movie. We will be reviewing that one. Have you guys seen Yeah, indeed. It's on the schedule. It is on the schedule, I assure you. Unless you want to review the French movie that I'm watching this weekend as well. It's called Smoking Causes Coughing. Made by the same guy that directed Quentin Duplass, made by the same guy that directed the Killer Tire movie.
Oh, Rubber.
Yep. Yeah, it's called Smoking Causes Coughing. It's like about a group of anti-smoking superheroes.
Oh, okay.
So I'm thoroughly invested in how this is going to be. But at any rate, we're reviewing that Murder Mystery 2 next week, and then Super Mario Bros. Movie. I was just telling the guys too, there's a ton of stuff coming out in the month of April that I'm really looking forward to. So can't wait to go back to the movies after my self-imposed hiatus over here. Starting with His Only Son. The first, actually, this weekend I'm seeing that Christian movie, His Only Son.
Yeah.
It is the first, period. It is the first entirely crowdfunded movie to be released in theaters, theatrically, like wide release. The theatrical wide release, entirely crowdfunded, and it's by the same. I don't know if you guys have heard this, Joe. You might have, just because you might have seen it actually at the theaters. It's the same company that makes that Chosen, that Bible show. And the reason I bring it up is because sometimes they this show is actually so fucking big that they put the season finales in theaters. And I've seen it like screened before, like the Chosen season 2 finale. It's based off the Bible. Like it's the same studio that does that Chosen show. So yeah, so that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing this weekend. His Only Son, spoiler. Like I said, I keep joking with my girlfriend. I said, His Only Son, spoiler alert, it's Jesus. anyway,
Godspeed.
I'm wilding now. I'm wilding at the end of the day. That's our show today. Murder Mystery 2 next week. Looking forward to chatting up with the guys about that. Joe, thank you very much for leading the discussion.
No problem.
Greatly appreciated. I thought we did Strange Days a lot of justice. Until next week, though, same time, same place. For Joe Viso, Dominic Guanzon, and yours truly, this has been Sleepless with Steve.